Hello, everyone. My name is Andrea Salazar. I'm a current undergraduate at UC Berkeley in the Ecosystem Management and Forestry major. Before I officially begin today, I first want to acknowledge that I'm currently speaking from and occupying traditional coastal Miwok territory. If you haven't done so already, I highly recommend you look up whose land you're on today. Today, I'll be talking about sustainable relations, human-coyote coexistence, and the wild and urban interface, or WUI. This project took place in the Golden Gate National Recreation Area and Muir Woods National Monument in Sausalito, California. So just a brief overview of the presentation today. I'll be talking about what the Coyote project is. I'll define terms like sustainable relations and share my Indigenous perspective. I'll next be talking about methods and data, and finally wrap up with results and future implications. The Coyote project is a collaboration between multiple organizations which looked at things like genetic analysis, diet analysis of the coyotes, and even community outreach on the coyotes, and much, much more. My focus in the project was looking at coyote movement patterns in the Marin headlands related to feeding issues and condition. This project started in September 2020 and just wrapped up in May 2021. Just an early disclaimer, this project was the first coyote tracking project in the headlands and is still in the early stages. There's much more work to be done, and so I'll just be sharing preliminary results today. So what is sustainable relations? Sustainable is something that we usually refer to as good, long-term, and for the environment, and relations meaning relationship. But how can we begin to move beyond just the ecological and biological definition of those words? How can we add more meaning? We can start by being a good relative. I started with myself. I began researching about the land around me, the Coast Miwok people, and Coyote. And as I was going through this research, I found a quote from Greg Saris, who's the chairman of the Federated Indians of Grant and Rancheria, and he says, "If we don't know its story, then we can't learn any lessons from it." So then I began to ask, who is Oye? What is their story? Oye is the Coast Miwok word for coyote. And for the Coast Miwok, coyote is a creator. Creation occurred on top of Sonoma Mountain, where he sat down and decided to create the world and people. But coyote is a creator for many other Miwok groups as well. My friend Jesse, who's told me Miwok, shared with me the story of coyote, or aseli, and lizard, who got together and created humans. Well, why am I sharing this? Because perspective and framing matters. If we begin to acknowledge all our relations, both human and four-legged, we can then begin to practice true sustainable relations, because it includes everyone. And it continues what these stories have done for thousands of years. Coyotes are native to North America and the San Francisco Bay Area. They're an important top predator because they maintain balance of rodent communities and mesocarnivore populations like skunks and raccoons and ecosystems. Here's a satellite image of the Marin headlands to give you an idea of where the project took place. I have circles here around areas where there's high concentrations of human activity. So the two main methods we used were GPS and radio telemetry. The coyotes were humanely captured, tagged, and fit with satellite GPS collars, which one of our coyotes is wearing here in this image. They were also given ear tags of different colors to visually identify them. So this coyote here, we call her Red Red because she has red tags in her ears. She's about 10 plus years old. So unfortunately, out of the 7 coyotes we captured, only 4 survived. The other 3 passed away as roadkill. This is a serious threat to coyotes, especially urban coyotes, making a project like this that much more important to be conducted. So the collars worked 2 main ways. The first was they would provide GPS information like coordinates, which would be sent to us online and can be accessed through a server. And the second was through radio telemetry. So if you take a look on your left there, there's a picture of me with my mentor, Bill. That was on my first day in the internship, and that was my first time working with radio telemetry. As you can tell, my face is very confused. So I'm holding a satellite above my head and a receiver in my other hand. So the collars send out a radio signal, which is picked up by the antenna, and then is heard on the receiver as a beep. If we are nearby, the beep is stronger. If we're further away, it gets weaker. So the collars release geodata daily, every 2 hours, which meant that we would get about 12 points for coyote. every day. And we would also use them for radio telemetry. So they would turn on for about 6 hours per week, and that's when we would go out and physically track the coyote. One way you can represent this location data is on a heat map. This map here represents Red Red's location data in the headlands throughout the project. The areas she visited the most are represented by the reddish-yellow coloring on the map. Once we looked at the data, we confirmed what we already knew. Red Red was hanging out at the Rodeo Lake roadside pullout. What you can see here is indicated on the map by the arrow pointing at the red spot. Here she would beg for food, people would approach her, and she would in general spend more time near cars and roads, which we know can be dangerous. To address this issue, we put cones around the pullout in January 2021, and this was to discourage people approaching her begging for food, and also to discourage her from being near cars and roads. So this bar graph here represents her location data at the pullout throughout the project time. On the x-axis, we have the months, and on the y-axis, we have the number of locations per day. And although it looks like in January, after we put the cones out, she was spending less time at the pullout, which is good news, there's a lot of other things we need to consider. As we know, science has its limitations, and as life goes, there's always other things going on in the background. So first in September, we were still trapping and collaring coyotes, and so we're assuming she was actively avoiding that area to avoid being captured again. Then after that, we stopped trapping and collaring, and it seems like she resumed her normal activity there. Then in January, we put out the cones. You can see after the cones were put out, it seems like she wasn't hanging out there as much. But there's a possibility from December through May that she could have been denning with pups or offspring. Denning is when an animal retreats some sort of hole in the ground, a hollow tree stump, or some sort of similar structure. So moving forward, I have two main recommendations. First is just to continue our research to build our data and our understanding, and to really build that foundation of what's going on here. In the future, we will continue trapping and collaring coyotes. And the second is to analyze the limitations. What was really influencing her behavior? Was it the cones? Was it she was denning? Or was it some other unknown element that we weren't aware of? Distinguishing that is very important moving forward. And finally, why does this project matter? Coyote coexistence is something that occurs in the US, but also in other parks across the US. And so anything that we find out here, any solutions we come up, can be easily applied to and is really relevant to the work being done across the US in our parks. A big thank you to the National Park Service, the Scientists in the Parks Fellowship, and the Ecological Society of America for this wonderful opportunity. And a very special thank you to my mentors, Bill Merkel, Rachel Townsend, Katie Smith, and Lizzie Edson. And finally, a huge, huge thank you to my community and to my ancestors for continuing to provide the support and motivation for me to do my work.